Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to this special edition of APTN National News. On Thursday, APTN News hosted a panel on Métis identity, modern-day treaties, self-government agreements, and the controversy surrounding the Métis Nation of Ontario. Joining us in studio was Scott McLeod, the Lake Huron Regional Chief for the Anishinaabe Nation, Celeste Pedri-Spade, an Associate Professor at McGill University, and Will Gooden, the Minister of Identity Protection and Inter-Indigenous Relations with the Manitoba Métis Federation. Here's the first part of that conversation. Thanks to you all for being here. Of course, representatives from the Métis Nation Ontario were originally going to take part here, but decided last week to pull out of the conversation. We did get a statement from MNO, and I'm going to read it all here now in full. And I quote, "This is not a battle between First Nations and Métis peoples. Our communities have long-standing relationships, and we will not participate in formats designed to deepen divisions manufactured by political agendas. Good faith dialogue starts with mutual respect, and respect must be rooted in reality. That means recognizing that the existence of Métis communities in Ontario is not a matter for debate. Métis rights in Ontario were affirmed 23 years ago by the Supreme Court of Canada. We were recognized by the First Nations in Ontario and the Manitoba Métis Federation before and after that decision. And we continue to be recognized federally and provincially, with this week marking the 3rd anniversary of Canada's recognition of the MNO's self-government. The MNO has consistently invited direct, respectful discussions between First Nation and Métis leadership and knowledge holders. Such conversations form the foundations of the political protocol signed by MNO and the Chiefs of Ontario in 2004, and the nation-to-nation held between the Métis Nation and the Anishinaabe Nation in 2005. Leadership has changed, but the facts have not. Our door remains open." Again, that was the full statement sent by MNO after they decided to no longer take part in this conversation. Regional Chief McLeod, I guess we'll start with you and just your reaction to what MNO had to say there.
Well, I guess first and foremost, I think I can honestly say that I agree with a lot that has been said in there, but I think we're looking at it from two different perspectives. First of all, they are right in the fact that, this is not a fight between Métis people and the First Nations. And it does have to be rooted in reality. I agree with that. The issue is not between MNO and First Nations of Ontario. The actual issue is the recognition that they're being given to without the proper research being done on who they claim to be. And so that's really the heart of the issue here is First Nations are really challenging the recognition piece that the province and the federal government are giving to them, which are directly impacting First Nations in Ontario. And a lot of this is based on unverified claims by the MNO, which are being readily accepted by the province and the federal government without any verification or fact-checking or research done, which First Nations have taken the initiative in Ontario to do a lot of that research, which shows that the existence of Métis in our territories were, in fact, non-existent. And we don't need that Western science to tell us what our stories and our oral history and our communities already know. But we have to go through those types of hurdles in order for colonial governments to really pay attention to what we're trying to say here.
Will the Manitoba Métis Federation mentioned there in that statement as well? It wasn't until 2021-ish, at least publicly, that the MMF started to be critical of the MNO, which ended with the Manitoba Métis Federation pulling out of the Métis National Council. Take us back, I guess. What was the crux of that divide?
Yeah, so the crux of that was identity, was who they claim to be and who they were bringing in without discussion, without knowledge, without moving forward, as supposedly a part of the nation. Back when MNO joined the Métis National Council, it was well understood that there was only a very small part of Ontario, that went to, Rainy River, perhaps, maybe a little bit further, and that might have been a part of the homeland. We did some research, and that's sort of where we felt it was. And then over the ensuing years, the politicians in Ontario just kept pushing and pushing, further east, and all of a sudden we're all the way to the Quebec border. When you say it's 2021, and that's when MMF left the Métis National Council, the Métis National Council left the Métis Nation a long time ago before that, when Métis Nation Saskatchewan and Alberta and British Columbia supported MNO in these 6 new fake communities. So supposedly they're new historic. Again, that's a little bit of an oxymoron, but when that happened, we asked the questions. Show us who these new communities are. The nation, under the principles of self-determination, they're the ones who decides who we are. It's not a small part of the nation that decides what the whole nation is, and that they're going to expand across other Indigenous peoples' territories, all the way to Quebec. Those are things that need to be discussed amongst all of us, and it never was. It was presented as a fait accompli. At the time, the province of Ontario and the government of Canada decided they're going to recognize who the Métis Nation is. They're going to make those decisions without talking to us. Again, that's so opposed to what self-determination is and nationhood. The entire nation needs to have a say in who we are, and once we started looking at it, we found that they're not us. So that's absolutely where we're at this point.
Celeste, the MNO in that statement again says that a discussion like this was meant to deepen the divide. I guess your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, Dennis, I'm an Anishinaabe academic, and discussing and debating anything based on what we find through research is what we do as academics. I also say that that's integral to Anishinaabe governance, to have these critical discussions, to continue to learn. It's fundamental to the growth of our disciplines and to the communities and the nations and the people we serve. I think what I find particularly concerning and somewhat frustrating is, I've seen some of the comments that the MNO has made, in particular related to research gatherings that we've hosted, the most recent being in December. There was a very large gathering that brought together over a dozen academics from University of Toronto, McGill University, University of Ottawa, and so forth, to again present the research findings related to the 2017 recognition and the existence of Métis historical communities in Ontario. And, I've read the comments referring to academics as self-proclaimed academics spreading rhetoric. And, it's so unfortunate, because I think there's a real missed opportunity to simply respond to the research. It's there, it's open, it's public, it's accessible, and I think that's what researchers do, it's what people with integrity do.
We need to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on a special edition of APTN National News. Stick around. Welcome back to this special edition of APTN National News and a panel on Métis identity, modern-day treaties, self-government agreements, and the controversy surrounding the Métis Nation of Ontario. Here now is part 2 of that conversation. Speaking of rhetoric, Chief McLeod, the MNO put out a video last year I believe it was from a conference here in Winnipeg in 2024, where they said that you had belittled and bullied Métis youth during those your speech there. I guess, did you want to respond to those accusations?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess in the same thread that Celeste spoke of, I mean, you know, instead of responding to the facts that were shared at that conference, they took something out of context and tried to paint us as, and these are the terms that were used by the MNO in previous events, such as the research forum that was in December, that, you know, anti-Métis, hate mongers, bullies, lateral violence, these kinds of things. And instead of responding to the facts that are presented, this is how it's responded to. And the simple, I'm not going to, you know, shy away from the fact that what I said was posted in that video, because everybody can see that. However, it wasn't an admission of something that I did. It was a factual statement that I think everybody at this table can agree, as well as Margaret Froh could probably agree to, is that it is hard to tell any youth something that they've been told as a lie their entire life. I don't think there's anything wrong with that statement. It doesn't mean that there's some traumatized child on the other end that I spoke to. I was speaking in factual terms. And so to take that and try to paint us as these anti-Métis hate mongers, bullies, that kind of thing, is really just showing that they can't challenge us with facts and their own research, that has to, you know, devolve into those types of comments.
Will, I think we can all agree that you're a pretty passionate guy here, including online. I think I've probably been on the receiving end of some of your passion a few times, but I guess, you know, what are your thoughts, though, on the discourse?
Well, you know, first of all, it's, you know, we're talking about issues that are going on in Ontario, and I absolutely appreciate being on a panel with Scott and Celeste. It's, you know, it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about this. But it is curious, you know, that the excuses that have come out about why Tony Belcourt and Mitch Case can't be here, you know, it's kind of incumbent on them to tell their side of the story. If it's got so much weight, then maybe they should be here telling it themselves. I was there when Scott said those things, and I agree with him 1,000%. When the real crime that happened here, or happened in Ontario, is that you've got leadership in the Métis Nation of Ontario that are telling their membership, their youth, that there's something that they're not. So it starts with the lies that MNO is giving to these youth, that they are Indigenous, that they're Métis, when they are clearly not either one. There's no connection to the Métis Nation. Being mixed is not the only thing that it is to be Métis. We are a distinct Indigenous nation. And you know, it is a smokescreen, like Scott was saying, that it's not addressing what was actually said. It is trying to demonize somebody for actually standing up for these youth who are being lied to by the Métis Nation of Ontario.
Celeste, any concern, I guess, around the discourse, the rhetoric around this, and the potential impacts on youth and others?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. And I think about it from my own lived experience. I'm a community member of Lac du Mille First Nation, which is just west of Thunder Bay. And I think about my own family, and this is the history, not just our experience, but of a lot of the families. And it's been decades of our families piecing ourselves back together, because we've experienced all displacement from our homelands, the 60s scoop, intergenerational survivors of the 60s scoop. You know, there are a lot of young people out there today who may have a great granny who was an Anishinaabe, and, you know, have since lost that connection or lost that family history. So what concerns me is that when there's a corporation like the MNO that comes along and presents this narrative that, well, this person belongs to something else, it actually interferes in the real restorative and reparative work that our First Nations, our communities have been doing for quite some time. And I don't think it's implied that anybody here, is saying, oh, you can't be Indigenous, or like there's a write-off here, here. It's really about understanding, okay, well, having a conversation, like, who was your relative? How did they live? How were they identified? Who claimed them? And what the research has shown us, and consistently, is that there's been mixed Anishinaabe in Ontario since, for 3 centuries, but that we cannot find evidence of culturally and politically distinct Métis communities. And so I find that, it's up to the First Nation, it's up to Anishinaabe to keep doing that work, to find our people that have, the great-grandmother or have a connection, to be able to welcome them home. And it's also up to Anishinaabe to determine whether or not that person, is still understood as Anishinaabe. That's fundamental to our self-governance, and I think we have those processes in place to do that.
We need to step out for one last break, and then we'll continue the panel discussion here on this special edition of APTN National News. Stick around. Welcome back to this special edition of APTN National News, where we're discussing Métis identity, modern-day treaties, self-government agreements, and the controversy surrounding the Métis Nation of Ontario. Here now is the rest of that conversation. Chief McLeod, you had taken on a lead role for the Chiefs of Ontario and Assembly of First Nations in advocating against Bill C-53. That was legislation that would allow Parliament to recognize and negotiate self-government agreements with Métis in Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. I guess was Ontario the major concern there, or were you concerned with the bill? It
was all based on the fact that this was going ahead without the proper research of knowing who the government was creating these deals with, and just taking it for granted that their revision on history was acceptable, and we were saying, no, you can't do that, and so that just organically evolved into other regions of Ontario jumping on and saying, yeah, that's happening here too, and whether it was British Columbia or Quebec or whatever, and all the chiefs essentially started to pile on and support that resolution, which led to the opposition of that on a national level.
The previous Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, Gary Anand Desangri, announced in December 2024 that legislation would not be moving forward as written, and doesn't appear to be moving forward at all right now on last check. But legislation that is moving forward and was just introduced a couple of weeks ago, and that's Bill C-21, which will give effect to the Red River Métis Self-Government Recognition and Implementation Treaty, the first self-government treaty reached with the Métis government in Canada. Will, can you tell us what the significance of this is?
Yeah, so, we did sign the treaty several months ago, signed by Minister of the Crown, signed by the President of the National Government of the Red River Métis, David Chartrand, and so it is a signed treaty. We had to go through our ratification process. We had an extraordinary assembly. We had consultations throughout the province, throughout our homeland, and to me, this legislation is the ratification process from Canada's side. So there's two parties to the treaty. We did our ratification process. They're doing theirs. It's a legislation that is enabling, able to. Sometimes government needs to have direction on how to do things properly, and that's what this is. So, we're looking forward to seeing it in the first, second, third readings and committee, Senate will be there to discuss and make sure that all of the correct information is there for those decision makers when they ultimately go to vote for it.
Chief McLeod just recently introduced this legislation, but as Will's saying, it's been talked about for a while. Are chiefs in Ontario concerned with this?
Well, the Chiefs of Ontario, I mean, we stay in our lane when dealing with issues that impact our territories and our communities. We fully recognize the autonomy and authority and jurisdiction of First Nations in other parts of Canada that are free to position themselves how they wish. We also recognize, rights holders of the Métis people that also hold similar, but we tend to stay out of things that really don't impact our communities in Ontario. Our focus has always been our communities and what the government is doing without our consent or without consulting First Nations in our affiliated group in the Chiefs of Ontario. And we stand united together, and we have allies obviously from the First Nations across Canada, as well as the recognized Métis Nations. We have allyships there, but we also know and respect that their business is their business.
Will, there has been some commentary, though, that this would create major implications for other Métis organizations. Is there broader implications to this legislation? No,
I don't think so. I think it's pretty self-evident what it is. It recognizes the Red River Métis. There's obviously governance structures that are somewhat different, and honestly, I think at some point the actual historic Métis Nation is going to find a way to find a path forward at some point. Canada is, basically had a treaty with us in 1870. That's what John A. Macdonald called it when he wrote to Great Britain that he's treating with the half-breeds. And this is a fulfillment of some of the promises that were made when we joined Confederation. It also is something that we, have been working on quite a long time. So, I just also wanted to maybe just touch base on some of the things that MNO has said or done recently, and they take a very self-righteous stance. When they say that they are not coming here because it's going to be divisive. They're the ones that started the divisiveness by making up these root ancestors that are actually First Nations ancestors. Stealing grandparents from First Nations is absolutely ridiculous. And then when they go in front of the court and make all kinds of crazy accusations, and the judge has to push them down. The judge said that they impeached themselves, that they did not provide the court with proper information, that they were more interested in putting out their political views than answering the questions that were posed to them in the court. So if they can't tell the truth in court, how can we expect them to tell the truth when it comes to something as important as nationhood?
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Celeste, Regional Chief, Will, I appreciate you all coming in here. Maybe we can do it again sometime with MNO with us here in the room as well. Thanks to you all.
Thank you.